Underway. It's time to call to order the June 14th meeting of the Zionsville Board of Parks and Recreation. We're going to begin by taking roll. Jill Pack.
Here.
John Salowitz. Here. Ryan Cambridge. Here. Chris Barksdale.
Here.
Kimberly Lane.
Here.
Coralie Palmer is not here tonight. So we have 6 members present. We have a quorum. We certainly can proceed with the business at hand. The first item on the agenda is the approval of the May 10th, 2023 minutes. Has everyone had a chance to take a look at the minutes?
Yes.
Did you notice that they look a little better? They're categorized better, and we got a new provider who's doing a nice job. I think that makes a big difference. Things are put in categories to make them easier to read. So we commend them on what they've done. I think they've done a good job. Do we have, bless you? Okay. Okay. Do we have a motion to accept the minutes as presented?
So moved.
Ryan Cambridge makes a motion. We have a second.
Second.
John Salowitz second. All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed? All right, that passes 6-0. The next item on the agenda is public presentations and comments. We have some folks in the room tonight. No comments from you?
Stan, that Jared is presenting approval for Memorial Bench.
Okay. So you're here to observe tonight. Okay. Okay. Would you like to speak about it or just see how things proceed tonight? Okay. Well, now would be your chance. You good? Well, hold on. Do you want to speak about it? Come on up. Come on up and speak about it if you'd like to.
We know.
And please say your name and address when you get to the mic.
And Bond at 705.
Okay, start over. Now you're on the mic.
Oh, okay. I'm Ann Bond at 705 Elm Lane. And we've submitted a proposal through Penny Putters, Women's Golf League, to, we've requested permission to install a memorial bench for Penny Putters, and in particular, our past president of 3 years who passed away,
Okay.
Sandra Hollingshead. We would like it installed on the ninth hole, the men's tee. And I think the community would benefit from it.
Okay,
So
that's great. I think you'll like the way this unfolds tonight. So
support.
thank you for coming and thank you for your interest.
Okay.
I appreciate that.
Okay.
Okay, the next item on the agenda. Oh, Jonah, do we have anybody online to comment? We do not. Okay, thank you. All right, the next item on the agenda is the Pathways Committee update. Chris Barksdale is our Pathways Committee liaison.
Yes, so most recently, a member of the Pathways Committee met with the Parks Foundation and maybe some people on the Parks Department to discuss some preliminary plans for we're calling it Trail Fest. So that's just in its early stages of talks. And also we've sort of started a preliminary list of pathways that we sort of think are most wanted, and we're going to really dig into them the next time that we meet. So
Great. Okay. Thank you. Anybody have any questions for Chris? Any comments? All right, then let's move on. The next item on the agenda is staff reports, and our superintendent, Jared Logsdon, is at the mic. Jared?
Thank you, John. Good evening, Park Board. Just want to update and highlight a couple of items from the superintendent report, and then we'll get going because we have a very full agenda. So first thing I wanted to highlight is that we have welcomed our IU resilience cohort, climate cohort for the season. So for the past several years, an IU intern has joined Zionsville and accomplished opportunities for us to improve our resilience and our sustainability. That began with the climate plan and has moved on to an urban forestry inventory and planting recommendations of last year. And this year we are working on a municipal composting site. So that wouldn't be a site for public use, but it would allow us to divert some of the collected leaves and brush throughout the year with DPW and compost that. recycle those materials and use them in our parks with our plantings. So getting that permitted, creating a standard operating plan for that, and also looking for grant funding for equipment is all some of the responsibilities of that position. On May 26th, the park board, mayor's office, as well as the department were out at Mulberry Fields dedicating the pickleball courts. We had a large crowd there that were eager to get onto the courts and play the first game. So that was great to see in the community. And every time we drive by, those courts are full. So the community is definitely appreciative of the 4 courts we dedicated out at Mulberry. Speaking of,
And I might add too, ahead of schedule and on budget.
that's
So
right. Yep.
That's good for you on administering that way. Thank you.
Speaking of Mulberry, last year, you'll recall that we granted an easement to Boone REMC for their fiber loop around the county, which utilized a portion of the rail trail to complete their loop. As a concession and a thanks for that, they are installing public Wi-Fi out at Mulberry for free. So we are currently working with them on private locates, and that should be joining our park very soon. And finally, I met with representatives and stakeholders around the county to discuss our next regional trail opportunity. So now that the Big 4 is kind of set in stone, both literally and in each community, we're looking at the Midland Trace, which, as you know, goes east-west across neighboring communities, and it is heading towards Boone County. So that trail would travel across Boone County into Lebanon, and a portion of that trail would be in rural Zionsville today, just north of Carpenter Nature Preserve. So we're just discussing kind of those preliminary things we want to highlight as far as connections, as well as the path it'll take. Kind of unlike the rail trail, segments of this potential regional trail have reverted back to landowners, and the rail embankments have been diminished or destroyed in some areas. So it's a little bit more conceptual and has a little bit more flexibility about its exact path, but it'll be exciting what the next 20 years unveils for that trail. And that's all for the superintendent report.
Anybody have any questions for Jared or comments? Yes, Kim.
On the Wi-Fi, long-term, does the Parks Department pick up the cost for that service?
Completely free. So we actually have that at Heritage already. Just a public service as part of their programming they do for communities.
Perfect. Thank you.
Anybody else? All right, thank you, Jared. Next up is our Director of Maintenance Services, the Honorable Chris Flanagan. Chris.
All right. How's everyone doing? Good evening. All righty. So I'll just hit the highlights since we do have a busy evening. So we welcomed our seasonal part-time technicians, Thomas and Luke, to the maintenance team. We also welcomed a seasonal natural resources intern, Jack. He works alongside Sam, our natural resources technician. Graffiti, we did have 6 instances of graffiti throughout the system, totaled just shy of 5 hours for removal. Our parks crew worked alongside Cornerstone Environmental on a noise monitoring assessment as the town increases its focus on employee safety and well-being. They basically sent out an agent while we were doing some work in the parks, and they just set them up with a dosimeter and just measured noise levels. They were using various equipment throughout the parks. Ecologic successfully seeded Willow Road with a prairie grass wildflower mix there next to the golf course. At American Legion Trail Crossing, we had an all hands on deck doing a facelift. We trimmed all the trees. We did flower beds, treated the pathways. We also did the same thing at Lincoln Park. Additionally, we hung the ferns up at the gazebo and planted some flowers at the flower pot that's on the northeast corner there. And at the fountain, we did ultimately have to wind up replacing the pump and the breakers for that fountain. Big 4 rail trail, we dug, prepped, poured, and installed memorial benches along the 100-foot bridge, again with an assist from Streets, excavating out that aggregate material on that work site. At Heritage, additional trees were planted at the tree nursery, and the dog park fence line was treated with just a vinegar soap water treatment to keep us from having to weed whip it all the time. We didn't want to use any glyphosate or anything that would be potentially toxic to the animals out there. So just a nice, easy vinegar mix. At Elm Street Green, our natural resources technician, Sam, partnered with a local Zionsville student to plant native flowers in the landscape beds in the upper portion of the park. And we got the decorative fountain started up. Mulberry Fields, season startup with ARC of Boone County volunteering. Natural Resources Tech Sam and intern Jack spearheaded this group. They mulched around the trees at Mulberry Fields, also weeding those beds and weeding landscape beds. And they've begun designing this season's mural painting, which will be at Creekside. We did a complete replacement of the restroom shelter water fountain that was in contract and installed by Godby. And we did some minor repairs at the top of the sledding hill, the fence that's along there. At Starkey Park, we did some trim back and treatment of hemlock, which had been growing through the staircase, and we did have to do an emergency call out to recover stuck UTV over the weekend. At Zionsville Nature Sanctuary, we had a May 5th partnership with Recreation at Eagle Elementary. Third graders helped us remove invasive garlic mustard, and they threw native wildflower seed bombs into the parks. Big thank you to Eagle Elementary. At Overly Warman, we trimmed back vegetation along the mountain bike trails and disc golf trails. We did a clear out of barbed wire, fallen trees, and just debris throughout the natural areas. We're gonna have to do that periodically since that was a fill site. Just as we have opportunities, we go out there and pull out as much as we can at a time. And we did install some additional trash cans along the disc golf and natural surface trails. That's all I got.
Anybody have any questions for Chris or comments?
What about the hemlock at over the Warman Pole One long?
There's more out there?
Oh, yeah, along
Okay.
at the longs, it's all,
Well, I'll make a note and we'll get out to it.
yeah,
It keeps popping up. It's all over the place.
people are knocking it down, stepping it
yeah,
over,
it's-
but it was 6 feet tall at one point, so.
Okay, we'll get out there. Thank
And
you
it-
for letting me know.
and it does filter on into hole one. Actually,
Into hole one? Okay,
It's all on hole, at the longs and then around the hole.
all right.
Basket, so.
I'll make a note and we'll get to it.
Right.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
All right, thank you, Chris. All right, next on the agenda is our Director of Recreation Services. Fresh from her appearance at the farmer's market last week, Mindy Murdoch.
Place. Farmers market, television. All right, well, good evening, everyone. So a little update on May. We, of course, ended the school season on a very high note. So we had over 17 private program groups. Most of those were school programs from Stonegate and Eagle, and as well as Pleasant View Elementary. It was nice to get to see the entire kindergarten from Pleasant View actually descend on Overly Warman Park. So, the circle works very well for 3 buses. So we're in good shape on that one. A couple other things. We wrapped up our Indiana Master Naturalist in May. We also did our first Creek Stomper rental for the year. And I was out at Christ Lutheran Church for their preschool family open house. So that was about 155 people that joined them for that one. We had a very successful party in the park with over 1,000 people showing up at Mulberry. Heard great things from the library that was there, as well as Chick-fil-A and Fun Days. Chick-fil-A actually sold out of food twice. So they actually had to shut down a little ahead of time because they had sold out about half hour before the event itself ended. And they had brought enough the first time round from what they had sold last year. So they were very happy with that one. Other than that, we've had our Active by Nature for summer was released. I did bring some if you didn't pick one up and you would like to browse through it. And then, of course, our Zionsville Butterfly Wings. The trail is up, 8 different locations around Zionsville, including the library, and they're beautiful this year, just as they were last year. So encouraging everyone to kind of get out and find those. You can download the guide or just open up the website and see that guide there to try to find where all those are. And this year, in the past, we just had in the guide, we had the artist statement in the guide itself. This year, we created yard signs, so their statement of their piece is right next to each of their wings. So just if someone happens to come upon them, at least they get a little information about what it is and not just some random wing sitting there. Wanted to invite everybody. So tomorrow night is our first Barnes and Brews for 2023. we are having author Heather Lusk is doing a talk on Boone County and Zionsville history. And of course, Traders Brewing will be on hand. So you can get tickets ahead of time or just show up and purchase your tickets at the door. And then I also wanted to highlight, included in your guys' packet was a report on the Nature Connections program that Rachel Felling, our naturalist, put together. Fantastic report. And so just to kind of remind everyone of that one. So this was a pilot study year to see how the program went with Eagle Elementary, since they do have Zion Nature Sanctuary in their backyard. It was fully graciously funded by Zionsville Parks Foundation for this first year. So roughly 80 students from the 3rd grade. And the way it was broke out is they had 2 outreach sessions that Rachel went out to the classrooms themselves and kind of built, each one was built upon the other one. And then a May field trip component out into the sanctuary. And then as part of that, after that one, they did a service project, which a lot of people thankfully helped, because imagine 80 kids trying to get them organized in a service project. And then she also then sent along the way, sent information back to the teachers to get their feedback from their students and their teachers' feedback on how the thing went. I thought it was really nice that she kind of set a goal, which I thought was very high, but a goal of 75% for all of her outcomes. And it was nice that 4 of those 3 outcomes she had listed actually went 75% or above, based on the feedback she got from the students and the teachers. So things that students understand the concepts of habitat and adaptations. They're identifying 2 positives and negatives impacts of humans on our local ecosystems, and providing at least one reason why it's important to keep our waterways healthy. And these are all based off of the school curriculum. And I kind of wanted, before you guys have any questions, this one I thought was fitting within her report. And I love that she put R. This really was her, because this was her brainchild and what she's really spent the time developing and working with the teachers one-on-one. But she put in that, in creating nature connections, our hope was to see students deepen their understanding of the role they play in ecosystems and have positive impacts. To see them take these concepts, extrapolate them upon them, and share with the greater community was incredibly heartwarming. The overall goal of environmental ed is always to encourage people to want to make positive change. Our program helped to lay a solid foundation for these students, and then their teachers took the concepts to a fantastic next level to share with the community. So unless you have any questions, that's all I have.
Fantastic.
I was a little disappointed that Rachel wasn't here tonight, because I wanted to tell her in person.
She
what a great
literally
job
just
I
got
think
back
she did.
from a 2-week vacation out
Yeah.
west. So I think
Yeah.
she's trying to play catch up with everything.
Well, it seems like a great program, and her description of it here is really terrific too. I think she just did a great job. So I hope that you'll pass that on to her.
Do.
At least I think that. I hope the rest of you think that too. I mean, it was really nicely done and well thought out, and it seems effective too. So
All right.
that's
sounds good.
great. That's great. Well, that's what we love to see. Anybody else have anything for Mindy?
All right.
Thank
And
you,
then
Mindy.
see
Very
me
quick.
if you want a guide before you leave today.
What's that?
See me if you want one of these before you.
Okay. We'll see you before we leave the room. All right, the next item on the agenda is golf course manager. Mike not with us tonight, but Jared is going to tell us about the golf course. Jared?
Yeah, Mike couldn't be with us tonight. He's cheering on the Zionsville High School team at state. But very happy to report the golf course is extremely busy this year, having a lot of patrons come through the doors and swing their clubs. This year to date, we have sold 108 season passes. That has exponentially blown the old record out of the water. So certainly attendance is up. In the month of May alone, we had 3,384 rounds of golf played and have had 6,303 rounds played to date. So extremely utilized asset in our community. That's all from the golf course report.
Okay. And the golf course looks pretty good too. It looks
They're
great.
doing a
this
great
year.
job out there.
Yeah. The rain last week helped.
That was
A little bit.
welcomed.
Yeah. All right. Anybody have any questions about the golf course?
How did the new drainage hold up with the rain last week?
I was actually hoping that there would be some puddling and we could at least show the difference, but there was none. The water, whether that was because we were bone dry or because it's working, was completely removed as soon as it fell. So Next spring, I think I'll be our best tell, but I'm confident it's going to help mitigate that.
All right, thank you, Jared. The next item is a report from our Parks attorney, Amy Nooning, not with us tonight, but her partner, Tom Whitsitt is. So Tom, take it away.
All right, sir. Well, Amy sent me a report from Paris this afternoon saying that she has continued to work with the attorney for the Zionsville Community School on finalizing language for an option to acquire an access easement to a parcel of ground that may be donated to the park board. She hopes to have the school board approval of the easement soon so that this can then be presented to this board next month. But that's the extent of her report.
All right, anybody have any questions on that? All right, then let's move on to what Ann came to see tonight, and that is the Zionsville Golf Course Memorial Bench, first item under new business. Jared?
Yep. So our memorial bench program has been in effect for 2 years, and we've welcomed a dozen new benches to our park system, which has helped provide opportunities for respite and relaxation along trails and parks. And this is our first opportunity to have one at our golf course, which is also can be a great applicant at each hole for those that choose to walk with their clubs and could take a rest. The penny putters approached Mike Wall about location and the style of bench for this. He's in agreement that this would be a best fit for the course's aesthetic. And the penny putters have offered to donate this bench and work towards its installation as well. So penny putters have called the Zionsville Golf Course home for 51 years. And today they are 85 members strong and out there every single week enjoying the course. So certainly a large part of the golf course's tradition and heritage as it's been under the ownership of the town. And I feel like this is a perfectly appropriate placement for the bench and would recommend that the park board approve this donation.
Any questions about the bench? Do we have a motion to go ahead and approve the bench from the penny putters on the golf course?
I'll make a motion to approve the bench on the golf course, but any.
Okay, John Salowitz makes a motion. Do we have a second?
I second.
Chris Barksdale seconds. Let's take a vote. Jill Pack,
Aye.
John Salowitz,
Aye.
Ryan Cambridge,
Aye.
Barksdale,
Aye.
Kimberly Lane. And I say aye as well. Passes unanimously, 6-0. There you go, Ann. All right. Thank you. And thank you for your interest in that. Thank you for coming out tonight. The next item, the Ice America matter. Jared?
I will defer to Tom to explain the document before you all this evening.
It's my understanding that, and Amy has been much more involved in this than I, but there has been an agreement reached to resolve this matter. Sam Gardner from Vice Miller represented the town in connection with negotiating on behalf of the insurance company. So we have an agreement. What we need to have is a motion to authorize John and Jared to sign on behalf of the park board.
And we've talked about this issue in our executive session, and I guess we've talked about it in our meeting. Anybody have any further comments or any thoughts on this?
No.
Okay, do we have a motion to approve Jared and my signatures on this document?
I would make that motion.
We have the motion from Jill Pack, Billy Lane seconds. So let's take a vote. Jill Pack,
Aye.
John Salowitz,
Aye.
Ryan Cambridge.
Abstain. I wasn't here for the executive session.
Okay, Chris Barksdale,
Aye.
Kimberly Lane.
Aye.
And I say aye as well. Let the motion, or let the record show the motion passes 5-0 with one abstention. All right, thanks, everybody. That's good to get that off of our plate. Next item, the Lions Park donation. Jared?
Yep. As you've likely seen in the news, the Lions Club has acquired 5 additional acres near their existing park and have the opportunity to expand their impact in the community, providing recreational opportunities outside of the park system. With that opportunity also is a chance to finally connect Lions Park to Elm Street Green. So years ago, working with the Storen family, we were able to secure an easement, but there was one missing segment, which is the parcel that was purchased by the Lions Club. So in meeting with them, there is the opportunity and the interest in creating that connection between the two parks. And as we zoom out the map, this is actually a critical connection in an Eagle Creek trail, which would not only span the entire length of Eagle Creek someday, up to Carpenter Nature Preserve, but would have the potential to go south into Marion County all the way to Eagle Creek Park. So a fantastic opportunity to conserve and protect this critical greenway and waterway, as well as provide accessibility and connectivity between our park systems. In speaking with that, we also discussed the tennis courts and pickleball court, as well as the tot lot playground out at Lions Park. So through previous decisions, the parks has a very small presence. The Parks Department has a very small presence in Lions Park and a small parcel which contains the courts as well as that playground. In discussing with the Lions Club, I believe it would be beneficial to our park system to kind of step out of the way and allow them to have the full purview of their park without having it interrupted by our operations, as well as allow them to have that egress should they need that or planning that space. So with your consideration, we would like to discuss working towards that easement along Eagle Creek, but also donating the small parcel back to the Lions Club. So the Lions Club actually did donate that to the town previously when a pair of tennis courts were being replaced with a building. So it only seems appropriate that we return the favor and donate that back so that they can have the full opportunities within their park. Happy to discuss that further.
Well, I would just say in regards to that the Lions Club is a tremendous community partner. And we appreciate, I mean, there wasn't really even much of a discussion about giving us that easement to build that trail between Elm Street Green and Lions Park. I mean, they were just very forthcoming with that. And that's just terrific. That's really important. And I think it's a safety issue too, because a lot of people walk up there on Elm Street and that's not a very safe condition when that happens. So, you know, we're just so blessed to have the Lions Club here and, you know, the attitude they have and the willingness they are to work with us. And I think that giving back that property that we have there, the tennis court, the pickleball court and the tot lot will allow them to have a contiguous stretch between their park and the Henkeline, the former Henkeline property that they now own. So it just seems like the right time to, you know, just do it all at once. It's not really a quid pro quo, but it is, you know, an opportunity to do a couple of things that I think are positive at one time. So that's sort of the thought behind this and the discussions that we've had. So
we currently go in there and do maintenance on those, on that
we
little
do.
part of the park.
We
So
do.
that'll come off our Chris's list.
That is correct. And, you know, it's important too to mention that, you know, we rebuilt the tot lot, what, about 3 years ago? The tennis court was resurfaced 2 years ago and the pickleball court a year ago. So it's not like we're giving them a broken down piece of property. We're giving them, you know, newly renovated stuff that, you know, that they can take on as their, you know, take it on for the future, which I think would be, you know, good for them and good for us.
Do we see this as a fee simple transaction? And if so, are there going to be restrictions in the deed that it remain a publicly accessible space?
Yeah, I think the intent is to always leave it a public space, but I don't know that we need to dictate that the courts have to remain right there. I know they are curious to find out what the community wants in those new 5 acres and they'll start master planning their site further. But certainly that it remains a public amenity.
And then with regard to the trail, that would link up with the existing trail network within Lions Park. Is that correct?
Yes.
That connection specifically where the trail comes along Eagle Creek, right? So on the north, turn around the north side of the park. That's where it would meet up. That's kind of a key thoroughfare where folks move from the nature park into Lions Park, or if they're coming from the rail trail up, and that's how we kind of cut through. That trail, that section within the park currently, I assume, is probably not meeting the standards of your current trail system. Is there any plan to sort of rework that particular linkage so that the connection between the nature park and Elm Street Green is sort of a contiguous section as opposed to it snaking down?
That's certainly open as an opportunity. So we are exploring the opportunity to apply for the next level grant, round 4. They have set aside funds for local projects as well as the regional projects that we were the recipients of in round 2. So this Lions connection would be included and we could extend that further to connect into Lions Park further, so they benefit as well.
Yeah, I think the path, I mean, we use Lions Park a lot and our kids happen to play a lot on the fields that sort of front that trail. And, you know, it's a great park path, but I don't know that it would qualify in today's standards as an actual trail connection.
Yeah.
You know, multimodal trail. So I think maybe just thinking about if there's a way to, if it's cost effective to widen that section, you know, to meet current standards, that way you have an actual, you know, contiguous trail connection between two of our facilities through Lions Park, I think would be great.
Yep,
So.
absolutely.
Jared, I'm assuming that the trails that are currently in Elm Street Green are to standard now, or relatively recent standards. So is the easement that they're talking about giving us there across or around the creek, is it going to be wide enough to continue that?
Yeah, so
I mean, that's the goal, I guess.
Yeah.
Okay.
So we're looking at it, the topography, to know how far away from the creek and what makes sense, you know, to avoid erosion and such. So the exact ask of the easement hasn't been decided yet, but we are starting that. So our goal would be to make it at least a 10-foot trail. That is the maximum width that the Storns allowed on theirs. So it would just be uniform with that to connect the two. That's kind of small for today's standards, but it's certainly better than 8 or, you know, 4 to 6.
So is it 10 and then the do they berms or?
Soft shoulders, yeah,
Soft
yep.
shoulder.
And we can start calling those recovery zones. So the idea is if you fall off the edge, you have 2 feet to kind of spill into.
Yeah, I think even 10 feet would be an improvement over what is in line, it's probably 7 to 8 feet,
Yeah.
I would assume
Yep.
currently.
That's Lions Park's trail. So I mean, the grant would have to, you know, they would have to apply for the grant. It's not really part of the town because that's their trail.
Well, I think we would want to discuss an easement that covered that length of the trail as well. So when we're talking about it
I
as a
think
region,
you're referencing their trail that goes along.
Right.
Along the creek. I mean, that's their trail, not the
Yeah.
town's trail.
right?
That's correct, but I think what Jared's hitting on is the bigger idea is if that is going to be the sort of equivalent of a highway connection in our trail network, we should have an easement that covers that. It should meet whatever design standards we can make it meet within our system, and we should maintain it as such, you know.
And that would take it off their plate as well. So they would still have it to benefit. But if we had a maintenance easement, we could help take care of that.
Well, and I think that would also, that trail, having that connection made through there would improve. I mean, I met with a couple representatives from Lions Park who reached out to sort of discuss land planning and things of that nature. But a concern that they have that I think is evident if you're out there, right, is there's just a lot of people in the park. So, you know, the fact that the trail right now kind of dead ends in Lions Park and then people kind of naturally follow it and do a loop, and it pulls you into, you know, the most activated portions of the park. They're full of kids and, you know, bikes and all kinds of stuff. I think if it were a clear through connection, you'd have a lot less of that circulation traffic, whereas people just kind of looping around and heading back out. So I know that I think they would be in favor of improving that connection.
And if we ever move Winterfest down in that direction, it makes it more appealing to have parking, and it's more of a partnership as
Absolutely.
opposed to just hosting our
Yeah.
event somewhere else.
Right.
So
I think it could open up that whole area,
Yeah,
which
it
would
would
really
be
be
good.
nice.
especially depending on what they do with their
Yeah.
5 acres, the rest of them.
All right, so what do we need on a resolution here? Do we need 2 resolutions or 1 resolution to cover both?
I would just say the motion to move forward on the easement procurement of that Eagle Creek pathway, potentially extending into Lions Park, as well as a recommendation. So the parcel owned within Lions Park is actually deeded to the town. So it is not a park board property. So I would just recommend a motion to recommend the transfer of that asset, and that would ultimately go before town council.
And we can do that in 1 resolution. Do you concur?
Yes. Yeah, I think you can. You should authorize both you and Jared to discuss the transfer with the mayor and the town council
Okay.
in support of that.
All right, so I'll go ahead and make that motion that we consider transferring that parcel to the Lions Club, and we also consider accepting the easement to build the trail from Elm Street Green to Lions Park. Tom, is that good?
And that you and Jared are authorized by the board to negotiate
All
with the town.
And that Jared and I are authorized to take that to the town and discuss it with the powers that be at town. Do we have a second?
A second. You got it. You go.
Ryan Cambridge seconds. Let's take the vote. Jill Pack,
Aye.
John Salowitz.
Aye.
Ryan Cambridge.
Aye.
Chris Barksdale.
Aye.
Kimberly Lane. And I say aye as well. That passes 6-0. All right, good discussion on that. I appreciate that.
One quick question I just thought about, since the playground is so new, the tot lot is so new, are we going to? We're the warranty holder for that equipment currently as the park board, right, or as a town. So will they be able to obtain warranty service through us, or is that warranty transferable for that equipment?
It's a great question. I'll dig into that deeper as well.
Okay. Which is something that if I were them, I would.
That's a
ask.
good idea. We'll make that part of the
Leave
discussion.
them in
Great,
orders
thank you.
If something were to happen.
All right, next item on the agenda is the park rules update. Jared?
So a goal of mine this year was to deep dive into our existing park rules and identify any gaps that we might need to discuss and consider updating. So the majority of our rules were created in 1998. So obviously there's been a lot of change in our world since then. Not requesting any action this evening, just to review kind of what was included in the packet, as well as share your thoughts about expanding that. So as we look at the summary of park rules and restrictions that was approved in April 25th of 2012, it lists the various items and the corresponding town ordinance or Indiana code, which restricts those activities. So that includes motor vehicles, bicycles, structures on park property, vegetation protection, fire, vandalism, et cetera, et cetera. The only recommendation I have for that list would be to include 2 additional items, and that would be to restrict horses and equestrian traffic in our park system, except for in areas that are designated equestrian trail, which currently we do not have any. And the second would be to restrict swimming throughout our park system, except for in areas that are designated as swimming locations, which also we currently do not have any of those. But just to highlight those in the rules, as well as bringing attention to them, we do have very seldom instances of horses in our park system, and we just are not equipped with the infrastructure to accommodate that at this time. And additionally, we have no proper swimming facilities where it is safe to do so. So just updating those rules would be my recommendation, and working with Amy to package that into an updated resolution.
I have a question concerning that. You talk about swimming. Eagle Creek has become quite the destination, from Starkey Park for people to go in there and wade. Technically, is Eagle Creek in that area part of the parks, or does the park property end at the shore?
It actually ends in the middle. So there's a lot of overlapping rules there because it's a navigable area. So you are allowed to recreate there. It is a public property, so you are allowed to access the creek there as well. So that's kind of outside of our jurisdiction as far as enforcing rules on that. There's certainly areas we want people to stay out of for their own safety along Starkey Park, just due to the outflow of the structures that are there, as well as any future parklands that we acquire along Eagle Creek, which might have turbulent waters or other considerations.
So if we own into the middle of the creek from the Starkey side, and now Overly Warman is on the other side, do we own into the middle of the creek from Overly Warman too?
Yes,
So we basically control the creek.
for a small segment. Yes, we do.
So why don't we have authority to, or should we worry about the people that go in there and wade? I mean, I don't have a problem with it, but are we having, do we have liability issues with that?
I think we would be protected under recreational immunity. I don't believe a creek is something that we could enforce to that scope. I would have to dig a little bit deeper into the codes with Amy. But at some point, you can't protect people from everything. Obviously in Indiana, we don't have steep mountains and things like that, but the more adventurous your recreational activity becomes, the higher risk you assume. So it's the balance of public safety as well as public access.
I think it's important too to differentiate between open water, deep water swimming, and
Creek wading.
creek stomping and wading, which, there's some areas of the creek that are deep enough to swim in, but, not that many.
Yeah.
So,
And the jumping off of the fishing docks at Overly Warman is, that's obviously been going on for quite some time now, so.
Yeah, well, I know someone who lives on our property faces that looks out over the pond, which we love. I mean, I would assume it's probably the same group of kids, but they've been coming there long before construction on the park ever even started. So, you know, I think that to me, there is an interesting balance, obviously, in the interest of public safety and managing our own liability. You know, which we've marked and signed the pond appropriately, no swimming and things of that nature. But at the same time, you know, and I understand there's been a handful of folks that have been calling in, but, you know, we see police constantly right now behind our park, you know, driving through the park, sometimes with lights on, sometimes multiple squad cars, you know, which is to me, probably, you know, they're doing a great job. They're doing their job, but that's a worse outcome than someone breaking the rules and, you know, at their own risk and swimming in the pond. So I think we've got to find this balance of how we enforce that in a way that doesn't detract from, you know, the adjacent properties, people that live on the adjacent properties and or the general park use. Because, you know, if you've been in that park, the trails are great, the paved trails are great, and they're nice and wide, but there aren't vehicular sightline clearances as they're not designed that way. So when there's squad cars moving through there at a decent clip, you know, in pursuit of swimmers or anything else, you know, there's also people using the trails at the same time. So I think there's a sort of a conflict of use there too. So I don't have an answer to that, but I think it's just something to, you know, take into consideration as opposed to, you know, just sending the police out every single time.
Didn't realize they were sending the police up for that, so.
I mean, they are being very responsive, you know, which I understand, right? I get it.
Calling.
I don't personally know
No,
who's calling. Yeah, I mean, I have.
It's a curiosity.
Yeah, it is from what I understand, a resident or two that are calling multiple times. That's all I know.
Well, I would just say that I would not be in favor of changing the ordinance or our park rules to allow swimming there.
Oh, no, I
don't
wouldn't
think we should do
either.
that.
I think, I wouldn't suggest that. I think that to Jared's point, I think that I would be curious to know from a legal liability standpoint. I mean, our obligation, I think, is to ensure that, you know, that people are aware of a potential hazard, right? Differentiating between a hazard and a risk. A potential hazard of the pond, and that it is clearly signed appropriately. And, you know, and if I don't know, I mean, I think that if the concern is liability, we have some of that managed. I don't want to reinforce the behavior that's not permitted or that is risky, but you know, I don't have an answer to that. I just know that right now there's just sort of this weird balance of parks full of police, and at the same time, they're never catching the kids, you know, because they can just run across the creek. Right. So, yeah, it's just an interesting, it's something I think that'll come and go as the park evolves and kids grow up and continue to grow up, but probably going to be a recurring issue.
Another question, I know this was part of what was approved in 2020 and 2012. So there's like about the alcohol beverages. So, you know, we have the barn and brews. So do we have signage for not to leave to go to Mulberry Park? I mean,
yeah, we can.
We didn't have that back then, probably. So
yeah, and those rules are actually kind of dated. So through our special event application, well, let me just divide that real quick. So Maple Lawn was given the exception of allowing alcohol on their premise at the time of its formation. You know, it hosts weddings and things like that. So Barns and Brews felt like a great partnership to invite a new user into our park system and celebrate through nature or history, paired with an adult beverage appropriately. So, so that's contained on Maple Lawn ground, which is leased from the park board. That's one of the few exceptions of the previous rules. So Town Hall, Maple Lawn, as well as the golf course are the three exceptions that are wrote into the rules historically. But updates to the rules. So the state of Indiana has ruled that alcohol has its place in public spaces. So working with a local ATC representative, you can designate an area to have adult beverages. There's just certain rules you have to identify and follow through. We're not pursuing that at this time, but Should we pursue that on parkland, it would go through the special event application, which the board would decide on prior to that event happening. But that would also require coordination with the ATC.
But I appreciate that.
Question on that specifically, is the alcohol policy, again, differentiating here explicitly between alcoholic beverages and controlled substances, right? To me, so I'm referencing only alcoholic beverages here. Is that governed is that in our jurisdiction in terms of these park rules, or is that baked into an ordinance, a town ordinance or something like that?
It was a previous local ordinance that established the exclusion, and then the state's code allowed the exception by meeting criteria. So it's a newer update, but again, a lot of these rules came in the 90s.
Right, but I guess in the case of our town, we have an ordinance and a park rule, both currently that prohibit alcohol. Is that right?
At the time, the town was the one that created the ordinance. There wasn't a park board ordinance.
Got it. Okay. So I guess something I would lift up for consideration. I mean, again, this is kind of the balance of liability, right? But I think that not having an explicit blanket prohibition on any alcohol in our parks as a whole, regardless of the condition, I think really does limit the types of events and fundraisers and, things like that can go on in parks. And I think there's a lot of really good best practice standards and other examples of communities who have handled very responsible alcohol selective, permit-based policies. Indianapolis has one that is fairly cumbersome, but does work, right? Where alcohol is prohibited unless you have a permit. To get a permit, you have to go through a process and get it approved by the park board. And, there's a regulatory process in place. So you can't just have open containers, but you can have things like events and fundraisers and festivals and things like that. So I know, as I've talked to other groups locally here about why parks aren't used more for these large scale community events or fundraiser events that are put on by the private sector, that is specifically brought up as a constraint to why our system isn't being used, because that's something that's a sort of a prerequisite for those types of things. So, I mean, I would encourage us to revisit that. And I think we would need to be very thoughtful in what sort of policy was put in place so that it could be regulated and managed and all of those things, but I'm personally not in favor of a blanket outright prohibition.
I agree with that too.
The library will be readdressing our rules on that same issue shortly as we open the new branch and have a community space that will be available after hours. So our process is still in play, but we will be having those same discussions. So it'll be interesting to see how the two organizations maybe learn from one another.
One thing I was thinking of is like Carmel along the Monon, basically it seems like it's an open container, walking through, and that's all through there. So I know I've heard some, one thing it's kind of, we don't have that, obviously that here along our trail, but just always been kind of wondered how all this works. So that's why I brought it up in the first place.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
That's a discussion for another time.
I think so.
Something
And
that
it's one that I think we should put on the agenda and dive into. I think as we, most of these policies that were written and then just adopted as ordinances were written in a time, an era of parks that has long since passed. Yeah, that didn't anticipate the way they are currently used. So I think it would be in our best interest to revisit that.
Yeah, well, it'd be in our best interest to think about it and then revisit it. So it's just, that's a
No,
good idea.
I don't think
a good
that's
idea.
discussion for today,
Right.
but in the near term.
Now, you don't want a resolution on this. We're just.
No, just introduction
talking
of
about
it
this tonight.
and
Okay.
the topics.
All right.
The second document I added with this agenda item was the code of conduct and enforcement. And truly, this is kind of just a rehashing of a lot of those rules that would incite potentially a response specifically from staff. And it's more or less a guidance of the actions we would like staff to take should these issues arrive. So inappropriate behavior, nonviolent nature behavior, as well as potential to incite violence, physical violence, and then obviously vandalism. So it's not necessarily, it's a very gray document to allow for wiggle room because every instance is going to be different. But just giving our staff the resources they need to know what to do in situations whether that's offering a verbal warning or contacting non-emergency or actually contacting emergency services in the event of an incident that requires that. So,
Jared,
and then, yep.
is what you're talking about right now, is that in our packet? Because I don't.
We don't see it,
that.
so.
Are you really?
No, we don't see that code of
Okay.
conduct. We just have the rules and regulations.
I apologize for that. Yeah, there was a document on the code of conduct. So I will circulate that and then we can talk about it more next meeting.
And I have one quick question about the summary. It also references motor vehicles. Did the town council just make a decision on a little bit of golf cart access somewhere?
No, that hasn't had any motions attached to that, but it was brought up at a town council meeting. Yep.
So, but it might need to be considered in here if that's going to potentially come up again.
Right. And that's part of the reason we're discussing rules. So the park board just set the rules for the park lands that they manage and maintain. And then understanding that we're not in a vacuum and there might be situations where there needs to be further conversations, and that would be one of them.
And you're talking about golf carts, but electric bikes is also something that, was not an issue the last time these rules were made. And, I think our predisposition now is to consider electric bikes to be bikes, even though they go faster than a regular bike. Well, I guess regular bikes can go pretty fast too, if you have the right person riding it. But for the purposes of this, I think, we're of the mind that electric bikes should be considered the same as bicycles.
And that's actually state issued as well. So that's a part of the state law and code that e-bikes can go anywhere that bicyclists can now.
Yeah.
So until that's changed or repealed, it would supersede our local governance.
And there's a new e-bike store on Main Street, so we'll probably be seeing more of those on our trails in the coming months and years. All right. Any further discussion on the rules? Okay, would you like to move on then, Jared, to the naming rights?
Yes, thank you. So moving on to naming rights, again, this is kind of starting from scratch and just establishing a precedent for how we move forward with naming rights as new amenities and new parklands are added to our park system. So researching various organizations around the country and developing the best practices, making phone calls to discuss what's working with their systems, kind of compiled this policy for your kind of digestion tonight and then future conversations as we move forward for adoption. But just understanding that it does take a village to build our park system, and Zionsville specifically has been extremely fortunate with donations and gifts in the past, and that same momentum carries in today. So our park system of 500 acres to date, over 60% of that has been donated in the past. So the very skeleton of our park system has been through donations, and there's never been a formal policy of how things are named or the considerations there. So just highlighting a couple things within this document, defining what a major donation or major gift is, and then some benchmarks for the consideration of the board for naming. So within this policy, the naming rights always are determined by the park board. So that power would always stay with the park board, not the Parks Department. Should a major gift come before us, either that is through a donation of land or fees for the construction of a capital item, we would bring forth the recommendation of the naming rights to that. So in the conceptual or the master plan of Carpenter Nature Preserve, we had items like an amphitheater and a boardwalk. And those items, should someone be motivated and moved to sponsor those, they should be appreciated and recognized for that donation. So this is just setting those expectations, setting the benchmark. If a contribution of a minimum of 75% of those costs or the majority of the deeded property are bestowed to the department or the foundation, then that would provide them the opportunity for naming rights. It also protects the park board and the park system. Should a name no longer fit the character or the image of our park system, we can discuss changing the names, because as times change, things and mentalities can change as well as we evolve. It also sets some guidelines for things that can't be included in, the promotion of gambling or items like that. And ultimately what this policy wants to do is balance our municipal stewardship as well as the opportunity for community partners and make sure we're just not a walking advertisement, but also we can't do this all on our own. So again, not asking for any action on this tonight, just to discuss, review, and we'll bring that before you at a later date.
Just a quick question with that, in differentiating between the naming of facilities and or I wouldn't imagine actual entire parks, but large facilities within parks versus sponsorship and advertising. The naming rights, I think, is there consideration for, like, let's say, and again, I think there's good precedence for this elsewhere locally, but the X, softball complex brought to you by X company, where that's a negotiated 5-year sponsorship. Would that fall under the sponsorships package in this sort of menu here, or would that be in naming rights?
So in that particular item, it sounds like that's a sponsorship, and we did approve a sponsorship strategy. To date, those are just 1-year sponsorships.
Right.
But within this policy, it does highlight sponsorships, but it also mentions that the lifespan of that naming right is dependent on each situation. So a park might be in perpetuity, an amphitheater might be the life cycle of that amenity, and then sponsorships would be case by case as well. But so in that vein, if that would really depend on the funds. So if they're funding the majority of that sports complex, then that would be a naming right, versus they're helping with the continued operations, that would be a sponsorship.
Right. I just think it's important to think about as we start to look at capital projects that would come online in the near term, large scale capital projects where we're trying to find funds from multiple sources, finding a naming sponsor, I mean, that's how the per se Y got built downtown. The project was dead in the water until they found a donor sponsor. So I think thinking about that and making sure that we have a provision in there for those large scale, I mean, it is kind of a naming right, but it's a termed one, right? So it's just making sure we differentiate between the two so that we can take advantage of those.
Absolutely. Yep. Thank you.
Yeah, I would just want to make sure that there's enough in there to protect us should their values no longer reflect our values, or the values of the community or the park, that there's a way to claw that back.
Yep.
And I come from a higher ed background. That's happened a lot with people's names on buildings. And so just making sure that there's a way to make that okay.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Any further discussion on naming rights policy? No? Okay. All right, let's move on, Jared. The Trail Baller Knox box purchase.
All right, thank you. As we complete the rail trail, it is our ambition to place a bollard at each intersection of the rail trail, just for safety, to limit any vehicular accidents that might want to turn onto that 12 to 15 foot paved trail. So earlier in the year, you approved a purchase for those bollards, and this evening we are asking for a purchase of 16 Knox boxes. So Knox boxes are the emergency service access boxes, where each department that would respond would have a specialized key to unlock this box, which would provide them with our park system key to unlock that bollard and remove it so they can respond in an appropriate manner. So just purchasing these for those rail trail segments, as well as a few within Overly Warman Park where we plan to put up a couple of provisions. So for 16 Knox boxes coded to the Zionsville Fire Department, the total would be $5,872. And upon approval, we will get those ordered and they will coincide with our bollard purchase.
You just need a motion.
Yep.
Make a motion to purchase the Knox boxes.
Okay, no further discussion? Okay, Kimberly Lane makes a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
Jill Pack seconds. Let's take a vote. Jill Pack.
Aye.
John Salowitz.
Aye.
Ryan Cambridge.
Aye.
Chris Barksdale.
Aye.
Kimberly Lane.
Aye.
And I say aye as well. Passes unanimously, 6-0. All right. CYFL.
Just as last year, the goal of Mulberry Fields was to reactivate it and invite sports youth back to the fields. Zionsville Youth Flag Football has taken us up on that for the second year, hoping to return from July 1st through September 30th, requesting 2 fields every day of the week. So last year we had a great season out there with flag football, and we welcome them back. at the rate of $5 per field per practice. And if we do turn on the lights, that would be an additional $5. Chris Flanagan has been working, our director of maintenance has been working extremely well with Musco to identify exactly what we need to do to turn back on those lights without hitting us with a surcharge from the utility companies. Just being an antiquated system, that was the issue over the past decade, and we just haven't had to flip them on. But now that our sports teams are hoping to play into the evenings in the fall, we're looking at updating that system. For your consideration would be a motion to approve the park board president to sign that agreement with Zionsville Youth Flag Football.
I'll make a motion to approve.
Well, first of all, anybody have any discussion about this?
Just is $5 per game enough to pay for the lights to be on or the servants to pick up trash? Or, I mean, how much more work is it for your staff?
Yeah, so there is some maintenance. The goal of when we set this fee schedule is just to invite them back, knowing that it was a lowered rate. And we will revisit that in the future. This would be the first instance of turning on those lights, and we won't do so unless we can avoid that surcharge. And the ultimate goal obviously would be to retrofit those lights as LED, but that takes time and justification for doing so. So as we invite these teams back, we're building back that reason of why that needs to be prioritized.
Yeah, after a couple of years of it being quiet out there, it's really nice to have those fields being used again
I've
and being
been
activated.
passing by because I live out in Royal Run, so I drive back and forth now because of the roundabout fiasco. And it'll be much better when it's done. But so I'm seeing lots of activity out there. It's nice. I saw I think I was out there. I saw rugby players.
Oh, yep,
Party in the park and
good.
So we need to entertain a motion. Do
I
you
make a
wanna go ahead and
motion
make the motion?
to approve the ZYFL use of Mulberry Fields.
John Salowitz makes a motion to approve ZYFL Mulberry Fields. Do we have a second?
A second.
Is that Chris?
Yeah.
Chris makes a second. Chris Barksdale. Let's take a vote. Joe Pack,
I,
John Salowitz,
Aye.
Ryan Cambridge.
Aye.
Chris Barksdale,
Aye.
Kimberly Lane,
I
and I say aye as well, making it unanimous. All right, the next item. Pickleball courts and Team Witskin.
All right, and with our new amenity offering the opportunity for sports out at Mulberry Fields on pickleball courts, we were approached by Team Witskin to also reserve those courts. We wanted to work small, making sure that it's successful for their operations as well as providing access to the public, since we know this amenity is in high demand. So we negotiated a 4-week term utilizing the courts from 6 to 7:30 p.m. on Tuesdays and Thursdays from July 11th through August 3rd. The park system, since this isn't a youth sport, would receive 25% of the registration fees for the Team Witskin participants. So again, they would only be utilizing 2 of the courts, so the other 2 would still remain open for public play during those 4 weeks during that time. So just exploring this partnership as well. And I would make the recommendation that your consideration of approving this agreement with Team Witskin for 4 weeks of pickleball instruction out our courts.
Would there be signage out at the courts letting people know, like you need to be off by 6 o'clock, so they aren't just surprised by that?
Absolutely,
When they
yep.
show up at 5:30?
So we reserve the rights within the rules to structure the courts should there be a park use or private entity, and this is the first example of that. And we would put signage so nobody's shocked. And again, there'll still be 2 courts available, so it'll just be a little bit longer waits if it is at capacity.
Has there been any talk of like the interest they have, like number of applicants or number of instructors, instructees, I guess?
Yeah, I'm not sure how many instructors, but I think they would have a maximum capacity on those 2 courts. They also operate at the Fishers pickleball courts. So they're used to working with municipalities and utilizing a portion of those facilities. And they just want to bring that to Zionsville as well.
Man, it's a way to promote the game, right? And get people active. I don't have a problem with it. It's only a couple of hours a week to get the kids motivated and get them out. So
did we have any discussion in advance with the local Zionsville pickleball community that this might, I mean, I know we have the rules, but that this is coming so that they don't just show up on July 11th and they're like, oh, didn't know about this.
Yeah, so we'll post the signs well in advance of that. So we'll get those up upon approval. But we haven't directly discussed this with the pickleball community. But we did try to set that expectation when we made the rules that this was an opportunity for use.
I think it would be important too, is as we, assuming we approve this, that as we go through this 4-week process, that we listen to what feedback we do get from the community. If there is any negative comments from those that aren't participating in Team Witskin, like you're taking up half my courts and doubling my wait time, or if they just don't have if it's just all fine, and it would probably help us as we move forward, with other people that want to reserve these.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea. Although Rick Witskin is not a newcomer to the community. He's been doing this for decades, tennis and pickleball now. And, so I think he's well known among the community and it's pretty diplomatic. But you're right. We should see how people receive it, but I tend to think it's going to probably be okay.
We're just opening them, so.
Yeah.
It also makes the case stronger for using them consistently when we want to put those next 8 out there.
Yeah, right, right. Okay. Anybody have any further thoughts? Do we have a resolution or do we have a motion to make a resolution about this?
I'll make a motion to approve the use of the pickleball courts by the Witskin group.
All right, Kimberly Lane makes a motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Chris Barksdale seconds. Jill Pack,
I,
John Salowitz,
Aye.
Ryan Cambridge,
Aye.
Chris Barksdale,
Aye.
Kimberly Lane.
Aye.
And I will agree with that. I say aye as well. So it passes 6-0. All right, the next item is the 5-year master plan resolution. Garrett?
All right, so I appreciate the park board and community's feedback on the draft 5-year master plan. We've incorporated the majority of those comments and edits into this copy that was provided in the packet for you all this evening. So the next step in the process, we have submitted it to DNR and received our certificate of approval. So it meets the requirements for us to be eligible for future grant funding through the DNR. So the next steps are for us to adopt that locally. The first step on that path is the resolution to approve this as a park board, at which point upon approval, we will get it before the plan commission for discussion and then ultimately town council for adoption into the comprehensive plan. So fantastic document and collaborative approach to listening to the needs of our community, eternalizing that in a document, and then having a roadmap for the next 5 years and beyond.
And as we embark on discussion about this, we do have Tricia McClellan in the room, who was a principal and authoring this 5-year plan. So we can ask her questions too, if anybody has any. So does anybody have any discussion on the 5-year Parks Master Plan?
I would just want to make a statement that the master plan does not include anything directly related to an indoor community recreation center. And the reason for that is not that there's not interest, because we know there's a lot of interest. It was included in the public forums leading up to it. We got a lot of positive feedback from people that are interested in it. It's not included in the parks master plan because it is a bigger project than just parks. And so this is a plan specific for the parks department.
Yes.
But it's not something that we just decided that no one really wants it, because a lot of people want it.
No,
I want one.
Yeah, I think it's been clear in the past several 5-year
Yes.
plans that this is something that the community desires, but I think you're right. I think there's a belief that, it's probably not within the bandwidth of the Parks Department to accomplish that. And it's going to take a broader effort among the town. And I do know that some very early discussions are going on within the town to hopefully move forward on that. But yes, as far as the Parks Department doing it, I don't think there's a realistic belief that the Parks Department could do it based on all the pieces that have to fall into place. Tricia, would you like to speak to that? Sure, come on up. We haven't heard from Tricia in the last couple of months. Maybe now's a good time. Tricia McClellan from REI.
Thank you. Yeah. We did talk a little bit about that in the staffing portion of the master plan, but I mean, you summarized it very well. It's just to have a facility like that, you're talking about increasing staff, by multiple, not just by twice, by more than that. So it becomes just a much bigger project that doesn't seem appropriate for, especially in the next 5 years, for the park department and the park board.
Any
would
other
say-
question? Oh,
So I
sorry.
was just going to add to that. I would agree in the sense that I don't think that implementing or bringing a facility online to the scale that I think residents have expressed desire for is realistic in the next 5 years. But I think if we want to even explore whether or not we could do that, there are things that we need to do in this 5-year period to further study and business plan around that. So I'm not making the insinuation that it's just a table item, because I don't believe that it is. But I do think it's important to note that, we need to move forward with some further thought and study to really dig a little bit more deeply into how you could achieve a project of that scale. Because because it's so big, I don't think that's reason enough to not do it. I just think it's, to your point, not appropriate as a 5-year goal to implement it.
Through the Parks Department.
Through the Parks Department exclusively.
Right.
Yes.
And what is just if you can give us a quick statement on the importance of accepting this tonight and moving forward with formalizing the 5-year Parks Master Plan.
The obvious reason is the grants and the funding that Jared mentioned that you have to do every 5 years to be sure that you're eligible for the DNR grants specifically. But the bigger reason to do it is, you look at this plan and compare it with the last 5 years, there's been a lot of changes. So having that update and making it current is really important to do that, at least every 5 years. The other thing I will say, look at the past master plan and look at the projects that were in there for the next 5 years. And you can check off the list of the things that were in that plan that have now been implemented, thanks to Jared and his team and approval and support from the board. So having this plan for the next 5 years really gives you that roadmap of, what to start implementing starting tomorrow, starting yesterday even.
Anybody have any other questions or thoughts?
I just want to commend, your work, team's work, putting this together. It was very well done. Being able to get the amount of input that was put in and the different avenues that went to go get the input was fantastic, and it's very much appreciated, and great job. So
Thank you. Thank you.
And a reminder that this is something we would all have to sign tonight. And what is the resolution number that goes with it? 2023 dash.
Need to confirm that with Amy, and she's not here this evening.
Okay. So how do we make a resolution?
We could table this till next month, if that is the desire. I just haven't seen the last resolution that we numbered and dictated.
We could table it to next month and still be on track to.
We want to adopt this within this year. The Plan Commission meets regularly. We have opportunities. This was
Okay.
just brought before because it's ready to go.
Okay, since we don't know which resolution number we're approving, I guess we need to table it till next month. So we'll make sure that's on the agenda for July. All right, thank you, Jared. All right, the next item is under old business, Overly Warman Park.
Just wanted to give an update. Tricia and myself continue to work with the contractor for the project to resolve the outstanding items in the punch list. An update, they have repaved some of the areas that were out of compliance over the past month, but there are still several drainage concerns as well as reseeding efforts and just little items that we want to see finished up as soon as possible, or explore other alternatives. And that's kind of where we are. This project's a year overdue, so we're just ready to have a complete park. And like you mentioned with the poison hemlock along the fairway, that's one of the items included within their work is to regrub the fairways and the rustic trails. So it's kind of that balance of holding back our staff from doing some of that work or allowing them to do it, and then it's not completed per the contract. So it's the fun dance we get to be in right now, but we're hoping to find some resolution very soon.
One of the large items I think that's outstanding is and I know we've discussed this and been on site to look at it, but the erosion along the back of the hillside of the berm that's on the, I guess, the east side of the pond. I think that, we're in that park constantly. We live next to it. We love that park. It's great. But I guess I would speak in my own professional capacity as a landscape architect that I don't think that the contractors have the town's best interest in mind and in the way that they're completing the work or attempting to complete punch list items. So I think that, and in Jared, I know that you guys are staying on top of them the best they can, but you can't, you can lead a horse to water, right? I think that the challenge that I foresee is that some of the, fixes that they're implementing are just new maintenance items that we would inherit if they're not done per the contract. In areas that there's erosion, they're just throwing grass seed on, unloosened clay. I mean, it's just one of a litany of examples. So all that to say, I applaud your effort of enduring the challenges that they have presented, but they have continued to demonstrate that they're really not interested in performing the work that they agreed to do for the fee that they're paid. So I think that in my personal opinion, we probably need to make a decision soon about whether or not it is in the town's best interest to continue this dance with them and walk away with a subpar product or pursue other means to terminate the contract and get a qualified contractor in there to do the work properly. If we think we can get them to do things the way that the contract and the specs say they should, so that we're taking ownership of a quality product that's sustainable and maintainable and safe, which in some cases I know that some as-built conditions aren't per spec and things of that nature, we're going to inherit all that. So, I know we all just kind of want to be done with this item, but they have not demonstrated good faith throughout the duration of the contract. The project is a year overdue of the year overdue date. And again, none of these things on us. Yeah, they've all fallen back on the contractor consistently. So I guess I would, as opposed to continuing to just push the ball down the road, I think there needs to be a decision on behalf of the park board and your department as to whether or not we think it is reasonable or feasible for them to actually complete the work that is remaining in a way that we would agree to before we continue to just, push that road. That's my personal opinion. And we've given them ample opportunity and time and grace beyond what is reasonable, in my personal opinion.
If I could chime in, Amy did leave me a note with regard to that topic and indicated that upon her return, she wants to meet with Tricia and ask Tricia to compile a recommendation and a specific notation of what has not been done and needs to be done. And then when that is received by her at the next meeting, or perhaps at the next meeting, if she has that information from Tricia, then there can be a recommendation made with regard to whether or not contract just ought to be terminated.
I would be curious in hearing, Tricia, your opinion professionally as to the constructed quality, not the design. The design and program are great, and the maintenance that the town is doing is on par with all of our other facilities. But how do you feel about the contractor and their approach to this project?
You summarized it great. There are several areas that are still on their punch list that have been on their punch list for a year that haven't been completed. It's not how it's drawn on the plans, it doesn't meet spec. And we've met with them several times and talked about those issues and had several assurances from them, and the number of meetings that Jared and I have had out there with them is above and beyond. But you're exactly right. That erosion, some of the solutions that they put up there are not per spec. And there's areas they've torn out and put back, and it's still not per spec. So that's not everywhere across the site, but that has happened in different situations. Yeah, there's several areas that are still on that punch list because they're not even close to what they need to be. Yeah, and we have started that. It's an update to the punch list, but it's also photo documentation so that that's documented very well, which makes it pretty hard to argue that it's not per spec when you have that,
Sure.
along with.
Yeah, the documents and the specs are solid.
Yeah.
And I think the evidence that they have chosen to disregard those is equally as solid. So I think when Emily gets back, I think that's a great discussion item. I personally am not in support of continuing any further discussion with them. They've just not demonstrated a willingness to act in good faith on behalf of the contract that they hold.
So we still have the holdback, right?
Yes, 10% as well as things that haven't been billed yet are still retained.
Yeah, well, that's another item we'll put on the agenda for next month, and we'll talk about that more next month. All right, Southern Rail Trail expansion.
Just wanted to update that this project is all but closed out. Again, that was another contract with our contractor for Overly Warman. They do have one or two items outstanding for that final pay app. We're just working with them. If they can just give us a credit, we'll close that out because they did at least substantially complete that project and follow up with punch list items. But just a couple outliers. We just want to get the liens released and get that fully in our operations. But we have began to maintain that as a department fully.
Any discussion on that? All right, let's move on then. The northern expansion and widening.
Excellent progress on this. We are still underneath the substantial completion for those segments. So the contractor is working in excellent faith, providing an exceptional product as well and coordinating with us regularly. So very happy with how these projects are going. Pavement is all down, topsoil is being re-added and addressed to the sides, and we will allow them to move on to phase 2 once they finish all items within these 2 active segments. So they are really buttoning up that nicely, and we anticipate that change over to the final segment here in the next month.
And they've done a great job from the start on that project. So
Great partners.
very pleased with them.
How long?
Has it,
Oh, go ahead.
has it followed the proposed timeline that we originally thought, or has this gone longer?
For the northern expansion and the widening.
Yeah,
So
the widening, I guess, especially.
Yeah, no, they're still within that substantial completion for that segment. They just got a head start at the spring, so they were working throughout the winter. We thought they'd be ahead of schedule, but they've just kind of fallen back into schedule.
Oh, okay.
And truly no fault of their own. They had a couple of grading issues that they had to resolve before the paver could come back. And being a paving company in the summer, you can imagine how full your calendar is. So it was just finding that time again. But still operating underneath that substantial completion target. And so every contract after Overly Warman, we did start including liquidated damages as well. So should this contract get to its substantial completion date for the whole project, and we're not meeting those targets, that's when we begin to recoup some of those funds. So just something that wasn't included in contracts historically, but we have added in for all projects moving forward.
And they have been operating in good faith. They're doing a good job.
Yes.
They're a
I
good
think
contractor.
It's just one of those things that people who live along there.
I know.
Yeah.
Asking you lots of questions about it.
Yeah.
To them, I'm sure it seems like forever, and
Right.
they maybe don't know what the substantially
Yeah.
complete date is. I don't know what it is.
And truly, it was all the progress they made in the early spring. So they got everything ready for paving. We had to wait on temperatures, but then obviously the delay in the actual asphalt made it seem a lot longer. You know, it made it seem like 2 months rather than a couple of weeks.
Mhm.
So do we have a date? I mean, I haven't heard.
I believe it's June. I don't, do you know off the top? Phase 1 is September. I thought phase 2 was. Yeah, we believe it's June, which they're right on schedule for.
The end of June?
Yes, yep.
Okay. And then when does the next phase start?
After we allow them to move on to that. So
Okay.
we want to make sure the entire park system doesn't look like a construction zone. So let's button up a part before we move on to the next.
All right, the rail trail trailhead.
Another project that's moving exceptionally well. So the structure has been completed. They are filling it with the utilities and the obviously the restroom lavatories. Landscaping and final gradings are being completed. Asphalt for the parking lot's been complete, and just a couple of small things that they'll accomplish to wrap that up. There will be a change order for this project in the near future. So as we pulled the old fence and looked at where our fence ended with the current project, there's a little bit of a gap. So just to be a good neighbor to our residents that look into the trailhead as their backyard, we're just going to explore extending that and recommending that for the next meeting. As well as the art installation, there's a cost associated with that footer, which I believe we can fund through our allocated donations for the year. And that would allow us to accept that art installation that we previously discussed. So those items will be forthcoming.
So when do we get the artwork?
He's working on it. He's working on the template base plate right now for the anchor bolts. So we're coordinating with the contractor to make sure that all lines up perfectly.
Yeah.
But again, this is all out of the goodness of his heart, and he's making great progress.
Is that going to be installed when the trailhead opens?
Yeah, that's the hope. If I don't want to delay the facility, if it's ready to go in the art, it's not just yet, but it would be nice to have that all at one time.
Somebody have any questions on the trailhead?
We have a estimated completion date.
I think it'll be wrapping up at the end of this month. Yep. So we'll probably do our final walkthrough early July.
All right, so big June for us. A lot of stuff coming together. All right, any other questions or any other comments for Jared? The next item on the agenda is claims, and you'll notice the claims are a little bit different as our financial system evolves. We're getting more notices on here about the payroll fund, multiple dates and multiple line items. But don't be alarmed. There's nothing wrong with that. That's just the way it's going to be now, where this is going to be a feature on our claims that wasn't a feature on our claims before. So with that in mind, does anybody else have any questions on anything on the claims? All right, do I have a motion then to approve the claims as presented?
So moved.
Ryan Cambridge makes a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
John Salowitz seconds. All right, Jill Pack,
I,
John Salowitz,
Aye.
Ryan Cambridge,
Aye.
Chris Barksdale,
Aye.
Kimberly Lane, and I say aye as well. All right, our next meeting is July 12th at 7 p.m. Want to remind you once again to sign all your paperwork before you leave tonight. We're not going to sign this resolution, but we're going to do that hopefully next time when we meet on July 12th. So does anybody care to make a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Joe Pack makes a motion. We have a second.
Second.
Ron Cambridge seconds. All in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed? All right. Thank you, everybody. We'll see you on July 12th.